Good evening. Jihad El Jihad once again with another chapter from the autobiography of a Detroit hustler. First, I'd like to begin this first of all. I'd like to apologize for my having entered these chapters in disarray. Um, what I'm going to do this evening is I'm going to narrate chapter one, which came after the boogeyman. And from that point on, I will give you my word. Everything will come in order after that. This chapter is entitled Zoom. I like to fly far away from here. It is a historical as well as logical fact that the original Africans brought here from this to this continent as a result of the slave trade were dark and or brown skinned people. As a result of the process of miscegenation, which is the mixing of races, due to to continued rape and mistreatment of the female slaves by the abusive slave master for their own perverted sexual gratification, a population of mulattoes or light skinned slaves developed. These slaves are often called high yellow niggers, red bones, etc. These slaves are also depicted as being mean and ill tempered by whites and other slaves as well. Whether this is in fact is whether this is a fact or not is and the reason behind it is very logical. First, let's examine if in fact this observation is true and is this characteristic learned, acquired, or hereditary, and what the fuck does it have to do with my story? Simple. Oftentimes, the light skinned slaves were the subject of abuse from both sides of the fence. In one respect, they were resented by the darker skinned slaves because of they reminded them of their hated and abusive slave master. Moreover, they may have actually been a direct descendant of the slave master, further adding to the resemblance of the slave master and consequently the resentment of the darker skinned slaves. In addition, the white slave master certainly didn't accept them because, after all, they were still niggers. Therefore, having been the recipient of such ill treatment, thusly one would assume that this ill tempered and mean characteristic was acquired, and understandably so. Where this characteristic was employed as a defense mechanism, it becomes a learned behavior. Because who wants to fuck with a mean motherfucker? Whether or not it is hereditary, it is still up for grabs, at least in my opinion. Me, I am without a doubt one of those high yellow, red bone, red niggers. And it has been my lot in life to experience all the ramifications, good and bad, that distinction brought with it. The odd thing about this dilemma is that we continue to facilitate this amongst ourselves, even to this day. And we don't realize that it's been a tool utilized to keep us divided along lines of complexion. And this division comes in degrees. You see, darker skinned blacks more readily accept brown skinned blacks than they do light skinned blacks. And both of them discriminate to a degree against light skinned blacks. And as a result, to a degree, light skinned blacks tend to mistrust darker skinned blacks. And I say this again, to a degree. But ain't that a bitch? And it still works to this day if we allow it to. My dad's family moved from 24th Street to Hillsborough in 1959. At the time, my mom and stepdad still lived in an apartment on 15th and Marquette. I attend at that time. Well, my days and weekdays and school days were spent with my mom, and I attended Goldberg Elementary School that used to be on the corner of 12th and Marquette. My time on 24th and 15th Street were great periods in my life. I had many friends. I roamed the neighborhood and played on the playground with no problems. Oh, I had a fight or two. That's normal for a little boy. But when I was 8 years old, my stepdad had taken me across the street to the King Solomon Gym. He and I had watched a fight on the Gillette Fight of the Week, and they showed Floyd Patterson, who was then the heavyweight champion of the world. I told him I wanted to learn how to box, so he took me to the gym. I had just started the fourth grade at Goldberg. The relationships I had established on 15th and on 24th Street were with kids I had known since I was able to walk down the stairs, off the porch. We all played together. We all went to school together, and there was a strong familiarity with one another. But now, 24th Street is history. Now, my summers and weekends are spent with a bunch of kids who are much more familiar with one another than they were with me. And by my coming only on weekends, I was always an outsider. I tried to fit in, I really did. They would initially tell me Take your little half white ass home. Or here come his little red ass. And that shit hurt, man, bad. I had never before experienced anyone who made any reference to or any distinction to my complexion and or hair color. I'm sure this was an attitude they had learned from something that from someone who was older, probably their parents. But I'm a kid. I don't know nothing about this shit. All I knew is they made me wish that I was darker and I didn't have red hair. Maybe then they would want to play with me and not say such hurtful things to me. Sometimes I didn't even want to go outside because I already knew what was going to happen. Sometimes older kids would sick their little brothers on me by saying, kick that little half white nigga's ass. I would fight sometimes I wouldn't. But I never understood why I had to fight in the first place. I hadn't done anything to anybody but try to get along. Why was it such a bad thing that I was lighter than them? Or because I had red hair? Why did people dislike and mistreat me because of that? There was a smoldering resentment building in me that was destined to erupt. Mixed into this cauldron to this very day was a kid that to this very day, and I'm 62 years old as I write this, to this very day, the very thought of this kid still conjures up feelings of hurt, hate, and anger. He was my very first perceived boogeyman. His initials are MD, and that's as far as I'll go with his name. As I said in the beginning, I only had to deal with this motherfucker on weekends and summer vacations. But my mom died 2 days after my 11th birthday. Now I'm living with my dad's family on Hillsborough all year round. And now this kid is a major pain in my ass daily. He fucked with me bad. Once he even hit me in the face with a baseball bat. Damn near put out my right eye. They thought I was going to die. It knocked me all the way across the alley. I crawled through the backyard into the house, and he and the other kids had run away, including him. Blood was everywhere. I passed out on the kitchen floor, but I never told my parents who did it. They had to find out for themselves. It was weeks before I was able or allowed to go back out in the alley, which was basically where we played. And immediately upon my arrival, he's fucking with me again. I am not at all ashamed or embarrassed to say that because of him, I know that in my life, I have truly experienced real hatred. Thing was, I could fight and would fight any of the other kids. I had my share of fights with the kids around the neighborhood at Pattengale Elementary, Weber Junior High. If I had to, I would. But not so with this kid, and he knew it. And he took full advantage of it. A real fucking bully. And what hurt even more than all that is I could tell he took immense satisfaction and enjoyment out of it. I don't know what it was about this kid, but he truly had my number. Oh, and by the way, he was one of them dark-skinned kids, too. I remember once all of us kids were in the alley having played ball in the alley on a really hot day. My mom had died, and there was a Social Security check that would come for me once a month. And they would usually give me a couple dollars out of it when it came, which I would then, in turn, take and share with the kids, buying candy and shit, still trying to fit in. When the subject came up about where the money came from and how, this nigga actually said, so what? Don't nobody care your mother died. I remember I sat there for a little bit and tried to act like what he said didn't bother me. When the opportunity came, I said, I'll be right back, y'all. I went in the house and hid from everybody in the little storage area we had under the basement stairs. And I cried so hard I got a headache. This is no shit. I asked God if I could kill him. And I meant it. After a while, when I was in the 7th grade or so, I used to steal my dad's knife out of his drawer and take it to school with me. I had a couple more bullies at Weber Junior High School that lived on the other side of Tyreman, and they were in the same line for a sticking like that nigga MD was. But they didn't fuck with me like he did. Because as I said before, those other kids would bring out the fight in me, and they knew I could and would if I had to. One day, coming from school, me and MD got into an argument. I was really boxing, and I was really into boxing by then, and my confidence was high. I was to the point where I'm ready to fight this motherfucker for real. But the buildup of all the shit I took off his ass for years is burning in me so hot. I don't want to just fight him. I want to stab him. Really, I want to kill him. At this time, we had both started the 10th grade. He's going to Cass, I'm going to Northwestern, and we just happen to be on the same Grand River bus when the shit gets started. A bunch of us kids get off on Grand River in Beverly. Coming across Grand River, we were walking down Hillsboro on the block that I lived on. We decided to go in somebody's backyard and get this shit going, and I'm ready because I'm about to stick this Slim Jim way up in his ass. All these kids attracted my dad's attention. He came running across the street and up the driveway just as I pulled the knife out of my pocket. By him being behind me and the crowd and his having his eyes focused on me, he saw me when I slipped it out, but MD didn't. My dad grabbed me, slapped the shit out of me, and took it. He said, "Get your ass in the house." Both of us slipped this by the skin of our teeth, him from being stabbed repeatedly and me from going to juvenile. A few months later, the whole neighborhood was razzed for the construction of the I-96 freeway, the Jeffries Freeway, and zoom. Finally, I'd like to get away from here. Even to this day, I envy people who had a happy childhood because mine was anything but. But even more so, I have a special spot of empathy in my heart for children who are the victims of bullying. Believe me when I say, I know the feeling. I had learned to become a loner, albeit not by choice. I became accustomed to the reality that there would be people who were going to take exception to me based strictly upon my physical appearance. Believe me, this is not paranoia, and it's not my imagination. If you are someone who's reading this and you happen to fit my description, then you already know it's not. If you happen to be someone of a darker complexion and you know someone who fits my description, have an honest conversation with them. If they're honest with you, I'm sure you'll be surprised at their response. But being accustomed to something doesn't necessarily mean you like it or accept it. And I didn't. Also, having become a loner, I was used to not having a protector or even an ally. I learned to fend for myself. I learned by trial and error how to recognize certain situations and circumstances and how to adapt and utilize my wit and wile to survive in a world that really wasn't very nurturing to a kid of my age, stature, and once again, physical appearance. My psyche had also changed dramatically. Having become a loner, I became not only comfortable with it, I preferred it. I no longer wanted to fit in with anybody. I wanted the freedom to choose my own course of action, take that course of action, and be willing to accept the consequences from that course of action, good or bad, alone. There was also another change in my psyche. I no longer regretted my appearance, but instead I became quite proud of it. I had figured, and once again, I had found, I should say, once again, this is not my imagination, that the ones whom would by and large take exception with my red hair and complexion were males. Females usually had no problem with it at all. And since I wasn't attracted to men anyway, I didn't give a fuck what they thought. Except if I thought, felt, imagined, or had the inclination that you were going to, trying to, or wanted to abuse, mistreat, bully, or intimidate me because you thought I looked like somebody you could do that to based upon your opinion of my appearance, I was determined to, and I made a mission out of showing you that you picked the wrong little half-white, freckle-faced, little red motherfucker this time. I made it a lifelong commitment to myself to never allow another MD in my life because the next one and the next one and the next one was going to pay in some way, shape, form, or fashion for the shit I took from that motherfucker. And if they didn't like it, go holler at him. It's his fault, not mine. To close this chapter of my life, I had a little cousin, Aaliyah, who was more like a sister than a cousin. She was an only child, and I was determined she wasn't going to have no MDs in her life either. She was going to have a protector and an ally, me. And for any prospective MDs in her life then, now, and in the future, as long as I'm around, they're going to have to pay just as any is mine. Thank you.